On Highgate Road in the hills above Berkeley, California, the Kelleys lived in a sprawling Mediterranean villa. From the outside, it was a centerpiece of mid-century suburban success: red-tiled roofs, 4 terraces, and a view of the bay. But the interior of the house felt like a laboratory. The doctor's office was filled with mortars, alcohol burners, and human skulls. In the kitchen, he prepared meals on a fast-food griddle. In the pantry, his oldest son once sat atop a humming freezer, contemplating killing his father with an axe. Dr. Kelley stormed up the stairs to his office, shattering a porcelain doorstop. Moments later, he emerged with something hidden in his hand. He stopped on the landing, overlooking his wife, his father, and his children. He shouted a statement that his family found incomprehensible. Then he put his hand to his mouth and swallowed. Dr. Douglas Kelley was a man obsessed with observation. He played games with his son, moving a single pencil on a coffee table to see if the boy could spot the change. This need to analyze had been his profession. A decade earlier, he was the U.S. Army's lead psychiatrist, evaluating the captured leaders of Nazi Germany. He had spent months inside the cells at Nuremberg, trying to solve a specific problem: how the men responsible for the Holocaust could function as seemingly normal human beings. In 1945, as the legal proceedings began at the Palace of Justice, the Allies faced a psychological crisis. They had to explain how a modern, civilized nation had descended into state-sponsored murder. The prevailing assumption was that the Nazi leadership must be fundamentally pathological, that their brains would show clear signs of clinical insanity or biological defect. Kelley was assigned to find this monster defect. His mission was to categorize the Nazi mind as something separate from the rest of humanity, creating a clear clinical distinction between the criminals and the normal world. Proving these men were biologically other would provide a necessary comfort. It would suggest that the horrors of the war were the result of a rare disease, rather than a human capacity. Hermann Göring was Kelley's primary subject. As head of the Luftwaffe and Hitler's designated successor, he was the ultimate test of the pathology theory. He was expected to be a raving, recognizable monster. But the man Kelley encountered was witty, charming, and focused on his own legacy. He joked with his guards and spent interviews trying to develop a rapport with the psychiatrist. During his transfer to a detention center, Göring flew in a small Piper plane with an American pilot, Captain Beau Foster. Göring acted like a fellow officer, pointing out landmarks and discussing aviation. When Foster asked when Germany began developing jets, Göring simply replied, "Too late," and laughed. Foster later recalled that the experience unsettled him. He said he questioned all that we knew about these vicious people. Göring wasn't acting like a patient in a psychiatric ward. He was acting like a peer. This was the problem Kelley began to document. If the people who designed the camps were witty, relatable, and intelligent, the theory of a biological monster began to fall apart. Inside the Nuremberg prison, Kelley used a specific battery of tests to look past the defendants' public personas. He relied heavily on the Rorschach test. By asking men like Göring what they saw, Kelley hoped to find markers of clinical madness. The results were consistent. Göring was a narcissist, but showed no formal mental disorder. He was intelligent and fully aware. Kelley eventually concluded that there was no monster gene. He found absolutely no evidence of a psychiatric defect that separated the Nazi leadership from the general population. The data suggested that these men were simply ambitious individuals who had optimized their behavior for a toxic social system. The clinical defect area Kelley had been sent to find simply didn't exist. Kelley's final report served as a warning. He suggested that the personality traits he found in the Nuremberg cells, the drive for power and the lack of empathy, could be found in any society, including his own. Before he could be executed, Hermann Göring took his final evaluation into his own hands. He swallowed a smuggled cyanide capsule, choosing his own time and method of death. After the war, Kelley became increasingly volatile. He brought the tools of his study home, filling his house with toxins and human remains. His children described his nightly visits as moments they had to brace themselves for, never knowing which version of their father would walk through the door. In 1958, Kelley ended his life with potassium cyanide, the same substance used by Göring. He even chose the same dramatic timing, a domestic moment on a holiday, surrounded by the family who feared his unpredictability. Kelley's research proved that the line between a normal person and a war criminal is a matter of social circumstance rather than biology. It was a conclusion that mirrored his own life, a man who spent years studying the traits of his prisoners, only to display them in his own home.